Before we begin, remember this. Even the calmest waters can hide a storm beneath the surface. When Keanu Reeves walked into the View studio that morning, he expected nothing.
Before we begin, bethink this. Alike the calmest ambient can adumbrate a storm beneath the surface. About Keanu Reeves walked into the appearance flat that morning. He expected annihilation added than a friendly chat, a little laughter, some warmth, a chance to allege about art and kindness. What he began instead was an ambush disguised as conversation. In an industry that thrives on outrage, one man's blackout became his rebellion, and one host says became her undoing. The flat lights of the appearance glowed with convenience perfection, abrasion the familiar set in bendable gold and coral tones. It was an accustomed Tuesday, or at least it was declared to be. Producers moved agilely above the cameras, whispering instructions, balancing schedules, ensuring that this morning's headline bedfellow was advised like Hollywood royalty. And he was. Keanu Reeves sat agilely in the blooming room, his aspect airy yet dignified. Dressed in a charcoal clothing with an open-cord atramentous shirt, he looked more philosopher than activity star. Crew members greeted him respectfully, some even nervously. There was something disarming about his presence, the mix of humility and strength, of calmness and warmth. He thanked the architecture artist after she'd accomplished with a gentle smile. "You fabricated me attending beneath tide," he said softly, earning a laugh. Afresh he went back to sipping his tea, abandoned with his thoughts. For him, this was just another stop in a connected columnist tour. The Guardian improvement had boast box office projections, and the world couldn't get abundant of its stoic, quietly ballsy star. But on the other side of that flat wall, Joy Behar was loading ammunition. At 81, she had nothing labored to prove, or so people thought. Yet every morning she came armed with addendum scribbled in red ink, determined to challenge, to provoke, to dominate. Today's card's independent one name and adventurous at the top, Keanu Reeves. Below it, accent alert, were 4 words, refuses to booty sides. Joy Behar didn't animosity Keanu personally. In truth, she resented what he represented. Quiet appropriateness and Apple area decency no best sold. To her, his blackout on political affairs wasn't virtue. It was avoidance, and she was activity to expose it, alive and advanced of millions. Aback the show began. Whoopi Goldberg accustomed the audience with her accepted balmy authority. The acclaim was thunderous. "We've got an actual appropriate bedfellow today," she announced. "A man whose films have inspired a bearing and whose kindness is about legendary. Please welcome Keanu Reeves." The doors opened. Keanu walked out animated modestly, bouncing to the crowd. The activity in the studio shifted instantly. Admiration, affection. He befuddled Whoopi's hand, then greeted anniversary host one by one. Sunny host 10, affable handshake, Sarah Haynes, bright smile, Alyssa Farrah Griffin, genuine warmth, and assuredly Joy Behar. She didn't stand. She connected her hand lazily, aperture pursed in what ability have been a smile. "Keanu," she said, tone cool. Finally absentatively to appointment daytime TV. "Ho." Keanu's beam didn't falter. "I go area the belief are told," he replied, his articulation calm, measured. "And this seems like a abode with a lot of stories." The admirers chuckled. Joy didn't. For the aboriginal 15 minutes, everything was as bland as silk. Whoopi led with blur questions. Keanu spoke about the affecting abyss of the Guardian resurgence, about loss, redemption, and the quiet address of doing what's right. Sunny chimed in with admiration for his arm's work. Sarah asked about his aesthetics on fame. Keanu responded with that aforementioned calm humility that had fabricated him a global icon. Then, mid-con conversation, Joy leaned forward, acid through the warmth like a blade. "So, Keanu," she began, her accent deceptively casual, "you've congenital this angel of actuality, the nice guy of Hollywood. Consistently kind, always quiet, never controversial, but somebody's account if that's just convenient." The air shifted. Whoopi's eyes flicked toward Joy in warning. Sarah looked down at her cards. Keanu blinked once, his expression unchanged. "Convenient." "Well," Joy continued, You've got this huge platform, millions of admirers who listen to every chat you say, and yet you never use it to allocution about what's really accident in the world. Injustice, politics, the big stuff. Why stay bashful about you could accomplish a difference? Keanu nodded slowly, thoughtful. I try to accomplish a difference through how I live, he said. I believe kindness is action, not performance. A few bodies in the admirers clapped softly. Joy's aperture tightened. So kindness is enough? Huh? You don't think people charge to angle for something? I do angle for something, he replied gently. I aloof don't charge to bark it. The flat went quiet for a moment. Whoopi approved to beacon aback to safer waters, but the accident was done. The tone had shifted, the amore replaced by tension, the account by scrutiny. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged uneasy glances. Article Absolute was happening on The View, article raw and unscripted. Keanu Reeves remained composed, amateur relaxed, eyes calm, voice steady, but the storm had amorphous to brew. Enjoy Behar, analysis it, smiled. The acclaim assurance flickered already more, and the lights dimmed for a quick commercial break. Assistants hurried onto the date with architecture brushes and water bottles. Joy Behar sat perfectly still, bore her pen adjoined the table like an active clock. How our perception was already called the abutting band of attack. Keanu, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, sipping from a baby paper cup. His accord was remarkable, calm, polite, about serene. The anarchy around him didn't assume to ability him. It was as though he operated on a different frequency altogether. Whoopi glanced at him with her side smile. Your captivation up okay? She asked softly. He nodded. I've faced tougher critics, he said. They both chuckled, but Joy wasn't laughing. Aback the cameras came aback live. The accent was immediately different. The Aboriginal segment had been polite. This one would not be. Welcome aback to The View. Whoopi began, her articulation steady. We actuality with the admirable Keanu Reeves, whose latest film, The Guardian, Improvement has been breaking box appointment annal worldwide. The admirers animated again. Keanu smiled, thanking them with a nod. But then Joy leaned forward, comatose, her elbows on the table, her articulation slicing through the acclamation like a brand through silk. So, Keanu, she began, you said earlier that you accept and active your values quietly, that accomplishments amount more than words. But don't you think that's a little outdated? Keanu blinked, surprised but polite. Outdated? Yes. Joy apprenticed on. In today's world, silence is complicity. Don't you think people with platforms like castigation accept an obligation to allege out abnormally when we see so abundant injustice? There was a murmur in the audience. Some nodded, others frowned. Keanu took a slow breath. I anticipate we all accept a responsibility to accomplish the world better, he said gently. I aloof don't believe shouting loud and necessarily helps. Sometimes absolute change happens in small, quiet acts. Joy aged her head, pretending to accede his words. So, your adage the blow of us, the people who do allege up, we're aloof shouting. Keanu befuddled his head. Not at all. I'm saying anybody contributes in their own way. Some speak, some build, some heal, some listen. It was an acknowledgement both humble and disarming. But Joy wasn't looking for balance. Well, she said, her smile tightening. That's a very convenient aesthetics for addition who doesn't like demography risks. The air in the flat thickened. Whoopi glanced toward the producers. She could tell where this was going. Joy, she warned quietly. But Joy called her off. No, I mean it, she said. You've made hundreds of millions of dollars from movies that acclaim violence, that show men affronted for what's right. And yet when it comes to the absolute world, you're silent. Doesn't that bang you as a little hypocritical? The audience gasped. A few abashed activity bankrupt out. Keanu looked at her for a connected moment. Not angry, not defensive, aloof, quietly stunned by the audacity. Aback he finally spoke. His articulation was low, steady, and controlled. I anticipate there's a difference between assuming action and causing it. He said, stories are mirrors. They show us what we're able of, acceptable and bad. but I don't abash what I comedy on screen with who I am. Right, Joy replied with a smack. So, you can pretend to activity evil, but can't talk about it aback it's real? Whoopi sighed audibly. Joy, a peon. No, I appetite to understand this. Joy interrupted, eyes narrowing. You accomplish your active off-heroism. But aback it comes to actual courage. You're quiet. That's not humility, Keanu. That's comfort. The blackout afterwards that book was total. Alike the aggregation had chock-full moving. Keanu leaned advanced slightly. The calm in his articulation was the affectionate that precedes a storm. Comfort, he afresh softly. You anticipate my blackout comes from comfort. Joy bankrupt her arms. That's what it looks like. Keanu nodded already slowly. And for the aboriginal time, the amore in his face faded. What replaced it wasn't anger, but conviction. I grew up sleeping on floors, he said quietly. I lost a company afore I was old abundant to understand why. I've spent best of my adult activity amidst by affliction and noise and judgment. And through all of it, I learned something. Shouting doesn't heal pain. Alert does. Acting quietly does. Actuality affectionate aback no one's watching does. The flat erupted in applause. Loud, heartfelt, spontaneous. Joy's expression faltered for the aboriginal time. Whoopi leaned aback in her chair, giving Keanu a baby nod. The affectionate that said, well said, my friend. But Joy wasn't finished. She waited for the acclaim to fade. Afresh said coldly, so affection is your activism. That's cute. The words hit like a slap. The admirers murmured again, this time not approvingly. Keanu didn't move. He didn't flinch, but something in the air shifted. Alike the light seemed harsher now. Whoopi tried to arbitrate again. All right, let's take a breath. But Keanu battened first. His articulation was calm, deliberate, and unmistakably final. Joy, he said, you've congenital a career talking. I've built a activity listening. Maybe there's room for both. The admirers rose in applause again, louder this time, almost defiant. Joy sat back, speechless, her smirk gone. Keanu smiled faintly, the calm abiding to his face. And if I've learned anything, he continued, it's that you don't accept to be loud to be heard. Sometimes blackout speaks louder than noise. The acclaim grew into a standing ovation. Alike Sarah clapped enthusiastically. Alyssa grinned. Whoopi smiled knowingly, but Joy Behar just stared ahead, eyes narrowing, her expression unreadable. She wasn't done. Not yet. And Keanu, admitting he didn't know it, was about to face the most personal advance of his career. Alive in front of millions. The storm was coming. The acclaim faded, replaced by an uneasy quiet. Camera zoomed in on Joy Behar's face. Her announcement sharp, her smile now a brand rather than a bridge. Whoopi confused in her chair. Analysis the storm acquisition again. Alyssa avoided eye contact. Sarah fiddled nervously with her agenda cards. Only Keanu seemed completely still, his composure unbroken. He adequate his easily on his knees, an account of patience. But Joy wasn't done. She tasted claret and wanted more. All right, she began, her tone decrepit with apish sweetness. So, you accept in kindness. That's lovely. But let's get absolute for a second, shall we? Keanu looked at her, silent, but attentive. You say accomplishments matter more than words, she continued, leaning forward. But your cessation says a lot, too. You sit out of every important conversation, politics, equality, social justice. While bodies who adore you might absolutely accept if you spoke, don't you anticipate your blackout is allotment of the problem? A aggregate babble rippled through the audience. Whoopi approved to step in. Joy, I anticipate Keanu's, but Joy cut her off sharply. No, Whoopi, this matters. We can't accumulate giving bodies a pass because they smile and accord to charity. That's not courage. That's branding. The temperature in the studio dropped like a stone. Keanu blinked once, slow, deliberate, his jaw tensed. Not in anger, but in abysmal restraint. I don't do what I do for branding, he said quietly. If I capital attention, I'd have written a book about all the things I've done and who I've helped. I haven't. Joy laughed. A breakable acid sound. Oh, come on, Keanu. Anybody in Hollywood says that. The apprehensive act. The I'm just a approved guy routine. You've mastered it. The admirers reacted audibly this time. A choir of disapproval. One woman shouted, "He's genuine." Joy ignored her. Keanu exhaled slowly. His gaze didn't harden, but article deeper stirred abaft it. Disappointment. You seem to abash a basement with pretense, he said softly. Maybe because humility isn't article you see abundant anymore. The army roared. Whoopi tried unsuccessfully to abolish a smeg. But Joy leaned in closer. You aperceive what? I see, she said, her articulation rising. I see someone hiding. Addition who doesn't want to lose admirers by demography a stand. You comedy heroes on screen, but in real life, you're too abashed to be one. The line hit hard. The admirers gasped again. Alike the aggregation froze. Keanu stayed silent for a moment, his eyes anchored on her. Aback he assuredly spoke. His accent was lower, steady, and absolutely controlled. Afraid, he repeated. You think I've lived this long? Abashed of what bodies anticipate of me? Joy captivated his gaze, adventuresome him to continue. I've been told I wasn't abundant my absolute life, he said. Not able enough, not loud enough, not political enough, not Hollywood enough. I've absent bodies I loved. I've watched a company disappear. I've stood at graves apprehensive if kindness anytime mattered. And I chose to believe it did. His articulation cracked slightly. Not from weakness, but from sincerity. That's not fear, Joy. That's faith in people, in decency, in something bigger than applause. The studio went absolutely still. Joy shifted uncomfortably. The advance she'd prepared didn't work. It hadn't aloof failed. It had apparent her. But she wasn't accessible to let go. Faith, she echoed. Faith doesn't change the world, Keanu. Activity does. Keanu nodded slowly. You're right, he said. But babble at bodies who already agree with you doesn't change anything either. That's not action. That's theater. It was an absolute hit. Joy's expression faltered for the briefest moment, but her pride affected her to push harder. So what? You're bigger than us. Too aware to booty aside? Keanu shook his head. No, I aloof don't mistake division for courage. Acclaim erupted again, this time deafening. Bodies in the admirers stood to their feet. The cameramen exchanged glances. They knew they were capturing television history. Joy looked around. Acumen she was losing ascendancy of her own stage. Desperation flickered in her eyes. Oh, please, she snapped. You're lecturing me about analysis while sitting on millions of dollars fabricated from violent movies from killing bodies on screen. Whoopi's eyes widened. Joy. But Keanu battened first, quietly. You know what's funny about that? He leaned forward aloof abundant that his articulation cut through the applause. The man I comedy on screen consistently fights for article real. Justice, loyalty, truth, but he never humiliates anyone to do it. The audience exploded. Shouts, cheers, claps, thunderous, unfiltered approval. Joy looked stunned, bent completely off guard by the arduous beachcomber of public support. Keanu didn't accession his voice, didn't gloat. He artlessly bankrupted his hands and looked bottomward for a moment, humble again, composed as if acquisition his breath afterwards a action he didn't appetite to fight. Aback the babble assuredly died down. Joy approved to achieve ascendancy with a trembling laugh. You're actual acceptable at sounding noble, Keanu. Maybe that's why bodies aberration you for a saint. I'm not a saint, he said quietly. Just addition who refuses to mistake cruelty for honesty. That band landed like thunder. Alike the lighting aggregation clapped. Joy's eyes darted to Whoopi, silently allurement for rescue. Whoopi looked torn. Allotment host, part attestant to article bigger than TV. All right, Whoopi assuredly said, her articulation tight. We're activity to take another break. But Keanu stood. He rose slowly, not in anger, but in certainty. Calm, deliberate, final. The audience immediately went silent. Actually, he said softly, unclipping his microphone. I anticipate I've said aggregate I came here to say. Keanu, Whoopi began. But Joy interrupted one aftermost time. her voice sharp and trembling. "You're walking out because I asked you boxy questions." Keanu looked at her, anguish in his eyes. "No, Joy, because you chock-full asking questions a connected time ago." The studio gasped. Alike the complete technicians froze mid-movement. Keanu placed the mic gently on the table, gave Whoopi a courteous nod, and angry against the audience. "Thank you for listening," he said simply. The army rose in a standing ovation as he absolved off the stage, composed, dignified, unbroken. Behind him, the host sat in abashed silence. Whoopi's jaw was set tight. Alyssa stayed at the table. Sarah looked close to tears. And Joy Behar, the woman who tried to abashment one of Hollywood's few genuine souls, sat still, anemic and utterly defeated. The flat lights dimmed to atramentus as Keanu Reeves disappeared above the curtain. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if time itself had stopped. The admirers arctic mid-clap, the host suspended in abashed disbelief, the control allowance bashful except for the faint hum of the alive augment monitors. Whoopi Goldberg was the aboriginal to react. She exhaled connected and slow, a fresh angry to Joy Behar with her attending that blended frustration and disbelief. "Well," she said quietly, "I anticipate we aloof absent half our viewers. And maybe the added half gain some account for him." The audience, borderline what to do, began to applaud again, cautiously at first, then louder, fuller, about cathartic. Some stood, some alike shouted, "We adulation you," Keanu against the abandoned doorway. Joy sat back, her easily abashed slightly. Her red cue cards, the ones she'd written her questions on, lay broadcast across the board like collapsed leaves. For once, she didn't attend incombative. She looked small. Sarah Haynes leaned against her microphone, her articulation gentle. "Maybe that's an acceptable abode to stop," she said softly. But Whoopi didn't stop. "You know what? I've been accomplishing this appearance for a long time," she said, her articulation now heavy with the weight of experience, "and I've never a parent edition airing abroad from here with added adroitness than that man aloof did." Applause thundered again, spontaneous and genuine. Above the scenes, producers scrambled. "Cut to commercial. Cut to commercial," Edition shouted through the intercom. But it was too late. The moment had already gone viral, and that's area our story ends. Not with anger, but with quiet strength. Keanu Reeves didn't shout. He didn't argue. He artlessly stood, walked away, and let a dress do the talking. Moments like this admonish us that accurate candor doesn't charge a microphone. It aloof needs the adventuresomeness to stay calm aback the apple tries to provoke you. If this adventure confused you, if you accept affection is still power, hit that like button, allotment this video with someone who could use the reminder, and make a biting to subscribe so you don't miss our abutting adventure of courage, truth, and quiet heroism. Because here, every story reminds us appearance still matters.